Wyoming Territory. August 1874, the wind rolled low over the plains, carrying dust and silence as Isaiah Kline reined in his horse at the edge of a burned-out homestead. The scorched barn collapsed like a broken rib cage. He had not expected to stop, just get water from the creek and keep riding, but then he saw her. She stood barefoot in the ash, skirts torn, face streaked with soot and grief. A woman alone, arms crossed tight over her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. Two children, a boy and a girl, sat quietly behind her in the dirt, their faces blank, too still for how young they looked. Isaiah dismounted without a word. The woman did not flinch, just narrowed her eyes at him like she had already decided not to trust him. Her voice was rough. "If you came to fix something, do not bother, nothing left to save." "I did not come to fix anything," Isaiah said, tying his horse to a post still standing. "I just saw smoke, thought someone might need water." She tilted her chin. "We got water." "All right," he said, and stepped over the broken fence. He walked past her and sat down in the dirt, not close but not far, just there. The sun beat down. The children, maybe 6 and 8, watched him like animals deciding if he was a threat. "I am Isaiah," he said after a while. "Did not ask," she said flatly. He nodded once. "Still figured you might want to know." They sat like that a long time. The girl leaned into her brother and he pulled her closer. Isaiah did not push for anything. He just sat, leaning back on one hand, hat tipped low. The woman finally spoke again. "My name is Ada Boone. Those are my kids, Rowan and Ruth." Isaiah looked at the children and gave a slow nod. "Nice to meet you." Ada did not soften. "Their father left 2 winters ago, said he was going to Cheyenne to find work. Never came back." Isaiah looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes were hard but not cold, just tired, bone-deep tired. "The fire came during the night," she went on, voice barely above a whisper. "Chimney sparked. Took the barn first. I got them out, but the house, it is gone." "Everything?" Isaiah did not say he was sorry. He figured she had heard that enough times in her life. Instead, he reached into his saddlebag and took out a wrapped bundle of jerky and a small tin of dried berries. He set them on the ground between them. "For the kids," he said. Ada stared at the food like it might bite. "We are not beggars." "I did not say you were." Rowan looked at his mother, then at the food. "Mama, I am hungry." Ada's jaw tightened, but she gave a small nod. Rowan reached for the jerky and handed a piece to his sister first. "I do not need a savior," Ada said, still watching Isaiah. "I am not one," he said simply. "Just a man passing through." She studied him for a long time. Her shoulders eased just a little. "You can stay the night for the kids' sake." "I will sleep by the fence," Isaiah said. That night, he built a small fire a safe distance from the ruins. Rowan brought over a blanket and sat beside him. Ruth followed. Isaiah told them about the stars, how if you looked long enough you could see them move. The children listened like they had never heard someone speak softly before. Ada stayed by the broken porch, arms tight around herself. When morning came, Isaiah packed his things. He did not say goodbye, just tipped his hat and mounted up. But before he could ride off, Ada called out, "Wait." He turned. She walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. Her voice was quiet. "I did not want help. I still do not know if I want it." Isaiah nodded. "But you did not push. You just sat there." "I figured if someone needs saving, they will ask." She looked down, then back at him. "Stay just a little while. Until I figure out what comes next." Isaiah swung down from the saddle and tied his reins again. "I will stay," he said, and he did. The days grew longer, and the charred smell faded from the air. Isaiah didn't speak unless spoken to, and Ada found herself noticing the way he moved, deliberate, quiet, like he was careful not to break anything that couldn't be fixed. He spent his mornings mending what little had survived the fire. A hinge on the chicken coop door that hadn't burned, loose boards on the well cover, a cracked water bucket. He never asked for tools, only borrowed them with a nod and returned them wiped clean. Rowan started shadowing him, trailing behind with questions he barely whispered. Isaiah answered everyone, low and even. Ruth hung close to her mother, still too quiet, but she'd begun to sleep through the nights again. One afternoon, Ada was kneeling in the small garden patch beyond the blackened house frame. The fire hadn't touched it, only smoked the edges. She was digging up what potatoes had managed to hold on, her sleeves soiled, hands caked in earth. She looked up when Isaiah stepped around the edge of the barn with a split rail over his shoulder. "You could have left days ago," she said, brushing hair from her face with the back of her wrist. "Most men would have." "I am not in a hurry," he said, setting the rail down near the fence line. "And I told you I'd stay till you figured what comes next." "I'm not used to folks sticking," she muttered. Isaiah crouched beside the fence. "You ever think maybe you don't have to be used to it? Could just let it be?" Ada sat back on her heels, the sun catching the side of her face. "I don't know what to do with someone who doesn't want something." He looked up from where he was bracing the rail. "What makes you think I don't? What is it then?" Her voice was steady, but she wasn't looking at him. "What do you want?" Isaiah tapped the rail into place with a stone, then wiped his hands on his trousers. "Peace and a place to put my bedroll, that's enough." Ada stood. "You really mean to just help without expecting something in return?" "I don't mind work," he said. "And I've had more meals here than I paid for." "You brought the food," she said. "Well, now we're even," Isaiah replied. She shook her head, bemused in a way that didn't quite reach her mouth. "You're a strange man. Isaiah Kline. I've been told." That evening, after the children had settled into the lean-to, Isaiah helped brace against the stable wall. Ada stood near the fire pit with a skillet of beans warming on the coals. She didn't ask him to sit, but she didn't send him away either. They shared the food without much speaking. Afterward, she filled 2 tin cups at the well. She handed one to him, her fingers brushing his. He looked at her, not bold, just steady, and she didn't pull her hand away too fast. "I used to think I was weak for needing anyone," she said into the quiet. "You're not," he said. "You don't know me," she said. "I'm learning." She glanced toward the children's shelter, then back. Her voice dropped. "If I let you stay, I mean really stay, not just for a while. You'd have to be patient. I've been scraped raw and put back wrong." Isaiah set his cup down on a flat stone. "I don't need you fixed, Ada." She didn't answer right away. The fire cracked behind them. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote yipped once and fell silent. Then she said, "I don't know if I believe in good men anymore." "You don't have to," he said. "Just believe I'll be here when you wake up tomorrow." She looked at him then, long and searching. "That's a hard thing to promise." "I've had harder," Isaiah said. Ada nodded once. "All right then, you stay." He didn't smile, just took his cup again and drank. The stars eased out overhead and the wind turned softer, like it had decided to rest a while. Isaiah rose before the sun, as he always did, but on this morning he didn't reach straight for the bridle. Instead, he carried a spade over his shoulder and walked out past the paddock, to the north edge of the property where the earth hadn't been scorched. The soil there was soft, shaded by a cluster of old cottonwoods. He marked out long rows with the heel of his boot and began to turn the ground. By the time Ada stepped out of the stable with Ruth on her hip, the back of Isaiah's shirt was damp through and the field had shape to it. "You planning to plant something?" she asked, shifting the child's weight. "Thought maybe some beans, maybe barley if I can get seed." He straightened, brushing dirt from his palms. "You aren't planning to leave?" "I haven't said I was." She didn't argue. She only watched him a moment longer, then set Ruth down and walked back toward her. "I'll start sewing more sacks. If we're planting, we'll need something to keep things in." That afternoon, Isaiah hitched the mule from the neighboring claim whose owner had left it in Ada's care the previous year when he joined the army, and rode 5 miles to the trading post. He returned with a sack of seed, 2 tins of lard, and a single bolt of calico in a deep earthen red. Ada didn't ask why he brought cloth. "I saw you patching Ruth's dress again," he said, handing it over without ceremony. She ran her fingers over the fabric, rough but clean. "You think I'm the sort of woman who lets a man buy her things?" "No," he said. "I think you're the sort who uses what's given and doesn't waste it." She folded the bolt. "That's true." The next week passed in rhythm. Isaiah plowed while Ada dried herbs along the stable wall. Rowan chopped kindling, and Ruth began to hum again when she walked. Isaiah built a crude table from barnwood and placed it beneath the awning over the stable door. They ate their meals there. No one said grace aloud, but Ada always paused before lifting her spoon. One night after the children had gone to bed, Isaiah lingered by the fire pit, sharpening the blade of his jackknife. Ada sat across from him, a small basket in her lap, the red calico turning under her needle. Wind stirred the edge of her shawl. "Tell me something," she said without looking up. Isaiah glanced up from the blade. "All right. Why aren't you married?" He rubbed the cloth over the edge of the blade. "Was once, long time ago." She looked at him now. Needle paused. "What happened? Caught fever, winter in Kansas. Buried her before the thaw." Ada said nothing for a moment, only reached for more thread. "What was her name?" "Ellen. You loved her." He met her gaze. "Yes." Ada's fingers slowed. "You don't talk like a man who lost everything." "I didn't," he said. "Just lost her." She threaded the needle again, her hands rough but steady. "I thought I'd have a quiet life. Maybe not easy, but steady. Then things got loud." "Louder than you could hold," Isaiah said. She gave him a look that wasn't quite surprise, but something close. "Yes." He folded the knife and set it aside. "I don't want to replace him." "You're not," she said. "He was gone long before the fire." He nodded once, slow. "I know." The fire crackled between them. Ada reached down and pulled the finished square of fabric into her lap. "I don't know how to be anything else but tired." "You don't have to be anything else," Isaiah said. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Do you want to stay for good?" "Yes. Even if I never touch you, I'd still stay." Ada looked at him, eyes unreadable in the firelight. "And if I did," he didn't move, "then I'd touch you like you're still healing." She didn't answer, just set the needle down and came to sit beside him, not close but beside, the same way he had that first day. And together, they watched the fire burn low, the night deepening around them, neither of them speaking again until the embers turned to ash. The first frost came early. It crusted the edges of the fields with silver and made the mule's breath rise like smoke. Isaiah rose with the cold and brought in the rest of the barley, not speaking as he worked, just glancing toward the lean to where Ruth and Rowan still slept curled beneath wool. Ada had started using her loom again in the shed, the one her father had built back when the land was first cleared. She hadn't mentioned it out loud, just cleared the space, oiled the frame, and began threading it one slow evening. That morning, with the ground hard beneath his boots, Isaiah nailed shut the last slat on the rebuilt barn wall and stepped back, arms crossed, studying the line of it. Ada came out beside him, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "You ever built one from scratch?" she asked. "Helped?" "Never alone," he said. "Well, it's straight." He looked at her sidelong. "You sound surprised." "I'm not, just not used to things being finished." He dusted his hands. "Plenty more to do." She nodded, then looked toward the high ridge beyond the pasture. "There's a grave up there, my mother's. I haven't been up since the fire. Would you like to go?" "I don't know if I do." but I think I should." He didn't say anything, just picked up a tin of nails and set it on the porch. When he turned back, she was already walking toward the ridge, and he followed without a word. The climb was slow. Ada's boots slipped once on the cold stone, and Isaiah steadied her elbow, but she didn't pull back. The air was thinner at the top, and the land stretched wide in every direction, all copper grasses and sagebrush under a pale sky. The grave was marked with a flat stone, no carving, just a line of white quartz laid across the top. Ada knelt beside it, brushing away a drift of dried leaves. She died in the spring. Was sick for most of the winter, but she waited until things thawed. Told me she'd rather go when the soil was soft. Ada's voice didn't shake, but she paused before going on. She taught me how to plant, how to sow, how to keep quiet when quiet was safest, but she never taught me how to trust. Not really. Isaiah stood with his hat in his hands, the wind tugging at his coat. She told me once to marry a man who listened first, not one who talked first. Ada looked up at him. "You don't say much. I figure most things worth saying come slow." She gave a short breath through her nose. "You're not what I expected." "I don't think you are either," he said. They stood there a while longer, the wind rustling the dry grass. Then she said, "Let's go down, they'll be waking soon." He offered his hand. She took it. That evening, after the children had gone quiet, Ada stepped inside the stable where Isaiah was oiling the harnesses. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed but not guarded, just waiting. "You ever think about settling anywhere?" she asked. "Only once." She tilted her head. "Before now," he met her eyes. "No, I meant now." She stepped inside, boots quiet on the straw. "You sure about that?" "I'm not always easy. I'm not looking for easy." She was close now, close enough he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way the lamplight caught in the curve of her mouth. "I don't need saving," she said again, softer this time. "I know," he said. "But if you ever wanted someone to walk beside you, I'd do that." Ada reached out then, slow and certain, and took his hand. Not just held it, but kept it. Like she'd decided something and it wasn't rash. "Then stay," she said. "Not for a while. Just stay." Isaiah gave a slow nod, his fingers closing around hers. "I will." The snow came soft that first winter, blanketing the fields in a hush that made the world feel smaller, like it had folded itself inward to protect what mattered. Isaiah patched the roof of the stable with tar-soaked canvas before the heavier storms swept in, and Ada sealed the windows with strips of wool she stitched, while the children watched from the floor, Ruth humming tunelessly to herself, her cheek pressed to a folded quilt. Isaiah moved in by then, though no one made a point of saying it. His bedroll had been replaced by a cot beside the hearth, and then that too disappeared. Ada had cleared a space in her room, not with words, but by folding back the extra blanket and leaving it there. He took it without hesitation. They never spoke of love in the way stories said people did. There were no declarations, no grand gestures. Ada would pass him a cup of warm cider with her fingers brushing his wrist just long enough to say she saw him. Isaiah would fix the latch on her loom without being asked. Love settled between them like snow, quiet, steady, and impossible to ignore once it had gathered. One evening, while the storm pressed against the house and the wind whistled low through the eaves, Ada sat beside Isaiah by the hearth, her knitting in her lap. Rowan and Ruth were already sleeping, curled on the pallet by the fire. "I had a dream last night," she said, not looking at him. "What about?" "I was walking through a field and everything was green. Not just grass, but trees and vines and wildflowers so thick they pressed against my legs." She paused. "I used to dream of fire, nothing left but ash, but now there's color again." Isaiah reached for her hand, calloused and warm. "Maybe you're dreaming what's coming. Maybe." She laced her fingers through his. "It's strange, isn't it, how you can come to feel at ease with someone without asking for it." "I didn't ask," he said, "but I hoped." She leaned her head on his shoulder, not needing softness, only truth. "You think we'll be all right?" "I think we already are." In the spring, they built a new house from the ground up. Not large, but sturdy, with a root cellar and a porch that faced west so they could watch the sun drop behind the hills. Isaiah traded his saddle for a plowshare, and Ada taught Ruth to weave, while Rowan learned to guide the mule in straight lines through the barley rows. They planted apple saplings along the fence line. Every stone they lifted, every wall they raised, felt like a way of saying they weren't going anywhere. One afternoon, as Ada stood with her hands in the basin, washing the last of the winter soot from the curtains, Isaiah came in from the field. His shirt was damp with sweat, his hair curling at the edges from the sun. "Found something in the far pasture," he said. She turned, drying her hands. "What is it?" "A patch of wild mint. Thought you might like to dry some, maybe for tea." She smiled, not wide but real. "You remembered." "I try to." That night he brought her a ring made from twisted silver wire and a stone the color of storm clouds. He didn't kneel. He didn't ask. He just held it out in his palm as the children watched from the doorway, silent and expectant. Ada looked at it, then at him. "You already live here, I know. You already sleep beside me, I know." She took the ring and slid it onto her finger. "Then I suppose we ought to make it proper." Ruth clapped. Rowan grinned, and Isaiah reached for Ada's hand like he'd been waiting years, not months. They married by the creek under the cottonwoods, her mother's grave just up the ridge. A neighbor's wife made a loaf of honey bread and brought a jar of sweet pickles. Isaiah wore his cleanest shirt, and Ada wore the red calico he'd brought her that first fall. There were no vows spoken aloud, no preacher. Just a circle of stones, 4 witnesses, and the kind of silence that says everything worth saying. Years passed, and the land grew generous. The barley ripened gold each summer, and the apple trees bore fruit by the 5th season. Ruth grew tall and quiet, like her mother. Rowan learned to read maps and dreamed of railroads, but he always came home in the end. When Isaiah's hair turned silver at the temples, Ada still reached for his hand in the evenings, and he still lit the fire before she asked. They never stopped working, never stopped building. But their days slowed, and their nights softened, and there was peace in the pattern of it. One autumn, as the leaves burned red across the ridge, Ada stood on the porch and watched the wind move through the grass. Isaiah came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "Still dreaming in color?" he asked. She smiled, leaning back into him. "I've stopped dreaming altogether." "Why's that?" "Because everything I wanted is already here," and it was.